Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Juliana if you've never been here before, and I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited that you guys are here as well. Don't forget to smash the like button. I think it's either over here or over there, and don't forget to hit subscribe. I post new videos every week. I apologize for the fact that the videos have been kind of stagnant recently, but they'll get back on the Friday, Sunday routine, hopefully within the next week or so. Let's move on to the content we're going to be talking about today. Alright, so today's video is going to be about building off of what we learned last video about servers, just basic building our own like simple HTTP server. We're basically going to be building off of that and like adding the pathing and routing video content on top of that. So that's going to be like exciting because that means we're going to be moving forward towards basically hosting our own like kind of web page with some communication between the back end and front end as opposed to just like a static HTML page. So that's going to be really exciting. I'm super excited. All right, so let's move on to what we are actually going to be doing today. So today's content is going to be centered around server routing. You will need all the various platforms that are going to be discussed from the last video. You need all of those installed plus their package management systems, which will be linked below. Alright, so today we are going to cover simple HTTP routing with Python, Ruby, Java, Rust, and Node.js. We're going to completely skip over C++ because it is way too complex for this kind of material. You have to basically write your own parser for that, and that's kind of like a complex topic in and of itself. And then you also, if you don't want to write your own parser, you have to you have to download and import like other people's packages or libraries that they've written, and linking that stuff can be a pain upon compilation of your server. So it's not worth talking about right now. That's like more of like an advanced video. So standard versus custom routing. Currently, when we start our simple HTTP servers, we are taking advantage of the default behaviors of the browser that serve up the index.html file if it exists. Otherwise, it just renders a list of files within the directory that you are serving up to the users via the browser and via HTTP. If you want to add a path or route, you need to add another file to that directory based on our current behavior. There is another way that creates more custom approach to routing and pathing, which opens the door for architecting APIs. Typically, developers import packages that allow them to simplify implementing the architected APIs for their respective platform or framework. We will be discussing these more in depth as it is a slight waste of time to cover the traditional implementation of routing without packages, just because it's not really the standard that people go by today. It used to be the standard way back in the day, but not so much anymore. And let's move on. So with Python, there are two packages that you can import that cover routing. One of them is Flask, and then the other one is Django. You typically want to install these through like a default package management system, which is called pip. And you need to define a requirements.txt file with your chosen routing package, and you want to import them in your server.py file. Make sure to install pip, otherwise this isn't going to work. Flask is typically more lightweight than Django, meaning there's less like code that supports the functionalities. However, Django is more robust, so it just depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for something that's just kind of lightweight and just like serves up like simple like web pages and stuff and simple API architectures, like Flask is totally fine. But if you're looking to do something way more complex and robust that handles a lot more, Django is probably a better option for you. Alright, so I have this file defined as a server.py, and I've imported the Flask module, as well as added some comments on how to run your own Django installation. The requirements.txt is basically the same thing that was in the slides. Now we're going to set up the environment using Py3 via the installation that is linked below. You just run py3-m venv, and it should add all of the necessary files to activate the environment within the server app. After that, you need to install the necessary packages via the requirements.txt file. So now we're going to run our Flask app. We just have to make sure that we set the environment variables for the Flask app and Flask env. The Flask app name is server because it's server.py. And then the Flask env is development. Now we're going to run our Flask app by running flask run. And then we're going to hop over to the browser to check out our simply routed HTTP server. Alright, so Ruby needs to be put on Rails in order to be used as a server, hence the name Ruby on Rails. Packages in Ruby are called gems and can be installed through the package management system called gem. Gems can be standardized for a project via the setup.rb file. To set up the routes, it needs to be you need to define a config directory with a files with an RB file named routes. Naming schema kind of matters for Ruby in order for things to like work out accordingly. So these are actually kind of mandatory for Ruby on Rails. On the right, you can see the example of how you would install Rails and kind of like a sample of what a pathing in the routes.rb file would look like. Alright, so the Ruby on Rails tutorial is a bit longer. So we're going to start out with checking out the server.rb file I have written in here, and I have some instructions on what we need to do. So we need to run we need to install Rails appropriately. I didn't have it installed, so I'm showing you how to install it. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes to finish the entire installation process. I fast forwarded through a lot of it. Just follow the instructions that are listed and you should be able to get this up and running. Now we're going to run Rails new server, which is going to create a whole new Ruby on Rails project for us. It's going to scaffold the whole thing for us. It's going to take about 10 minutes. Alright, so it looks like it finished installing, and I'm going to open up the routes.rb file just so you guys know where it's at. Now we need to run the Webpacker installation. It's depicted in the server.rb file. I'm just going to let that run. Now I'm just going to clear out all of the installation garbage, and we can run the server using Rails S, and boom, it's working. Woohoo! For Node.js, there is a standard package that everyone likes to use called Express.js for routing. You can also create your own package that handles routing that you can register through npm on GitHub. I don't recommend doing this, but if you know how to create parsers really well, it would be a fun challenge to tackle. Otherwise, don't spend time on it. Packages for Node can be handled through 2 different package management systems. One is called Yarn, and then the other one is called NPM. NPM is kind of like the general standard, but you have to define everything in a package.json file within the Node.js project. Typically, the server is defined in a file called either app.js, index.js, main.js, or server.js. The default for a package.json, the default name that it looks for if you don't define it within your package.json is the server.js. Now we're moving on to the Node.js tutorial. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create a new file for our server. So I'm calling it server.js. And then we need to npm init, and then we need to npm install express, and then we are going to import express into our server.js file. npm init is going to create our package.json for us, so that way when we install, we don't have to like really create our own file and mess around with the manifest. Now that Express has been installed, we're going to import it into our, we're going to require it in our server.js file. Then we're going to init our app, and then we're going to define a route on the root as a get, and we're just going to respond with hello world. And then I'm also going to log out the request body, or just the request in general, so that I'll show you at the end of the tutorial what that kind of looks like. We need to also add a listener on the port 3000, so that way once we go over to the browser, it actually has something to access. And it looks like hello world is being logged to our browser, which is excellent. And then if we look over at the terminal, we can see what the request body looks like. I don't expect everyone to know how to read this just yet, but it's just so you guys know how to do it in the future. Java has 2 routing libraries for servers. One is called Spring and the other one is called Spark. Both libraries are used via the compiled version of Java and not the executable, runnable. It doesn't implement the runnable class or interface, sorry. If you do choose to do the interpreted version instead of the compiled version of Java, you would have to do like a regex matching of your routes to create a more custom API. I don't advise doing this for every single one of your projects, just because it can cause issues with tech debt later on if your project becomes way too big. That's why the compiled version exists. You'll need to define a pom.xml file for the compiled to define the compiled external libraries that are going to be used to link within your server. Alright, so this one is just going to be Spring. I don't think I'm going to cover Spark because that one looked kind of messy. It looked like it was not going to be fun. It looks like I have to download an IDE for it. So we're just going to use Spring Boot. I mean, that's what most people do anyway in the industry. They normally just use Spring Boot. But we're going to start out by kind of going to the website and just installing everything that it's recommending me to install. Like, this is the first time I've been installing Spring Boot on my computer, so I normally use Node.js just because like it's already installed pretty like easily like right off the bat. But Spring Boot is pretty nice too. You can see like this is my first run through of installing it, and I can get it up and running within a few minutes. When you run mvnw, it's Maven like basically running a compilation against Spring Boot, so that way you can run your server. There are two types of projects for Java. There's Maven and Gradle. I typically like to use Gradle for Android applications, but Maven's also really nice. They basically help compile dependencies with external jars. There are also like two other languages other than Java that you can build with Maven or Gradle, and it is Catlin and Groovy, but they're similar to Java as well. I was missing a few dependencies, as well as the artifact ID was not. It didn't play well with what was already installed. I have a feeling like something else is named that, so like the naming schema was just like kind of overwriting itself, which is not ideal. I might need to submit a bug report for that. But as you can tell, you just kind of have to wait for everything to install. And then once everything is installed, you have to go to port 8080 in order to get it running. We only have a listener on the path hello for hello world, so we have to go to hello. And that's that. All right, so Rust is purely compiled, kind of like C++ and C. Java is also compiled, but it also has an interpreter built into it, so it is a little bit easier just because of the interpreter that is built into it. Rust, however, is not so nice. Well, it is really nice, but it's just not an interpreter. Okay, so to import libraries or packages with ncargo, you have to install them as crates, and you need to install them via a package management system called Cargo. Two of the most commonly used routing systems that exist are router and SN routing. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce those, but those are the two most common ones I've seen so far. These need to be defined in your manifest called cargo.toml, your toml file. Sorry. Sorry. The crates need to be defined under your dependency section. And then in your package section, you can define the more custom parts of your project, like author's name and version. Okay, so we're going to run cargo init to init our server for Rust. And then I'm just going to show you all the different files that it generated and whatnot. I'm also going to like not list them in the Git, so that way when I push it, it's not going to push those files because I don't want those to be included. Alright, so I'm going to basically copy over the server code from the basic servers file, Rust file, and then put it in my main. The U router is for the UI framework, which we're not going to mess with until like probably a few videos from now, probably more of like an intermediate one. Let me think, is there anything else I need to tell you? Nope, that's all. that concludes my content on simple HTTP server routing. If you have any questions, go ahead and send me an email at hello@pumpkinspicelatte.org. Thank you for watching, and ciao!